They're Earth's new apex predators. And more prey.
Elevation is the newest big giant monster flick end of world situation for the human race to hit theaters. It's directed by George Nolfi, and I feel like while this genre has been around for such a long time, it really had a resurgence in 2018 with the movie A Quiet Place. And of course in that film, big giant unknown monsters had taken over the earth, humanity had been whittled down, but there was one little thing that was keeping humanity alive, and of course in the A Quiet Place films, that is being quiet. And that movie spawned 2 sequels, and several other films have come out in the last couple of years. As example, we got Bird Box on Netflix, where if you didn't look at the monsters, if you blindfolded yourself, well then these monsters could not get you. For whatever reason, seeing them was the trigger in that film. And then earlier this year, we got the movie Arcadian starring Nicolas Cage, and actually I did a review for that. You can check that out on my channel. And in that film, if the humans went out during the day, they were fine, but as soon as nightfall happens, the humans had to get indoors because these monsters would come out, and they were pretty much indestructible. And this film is no different because the monsters have taken over the earth. Humanity has been whittled down, but as the title suggests, the film is titled Elevation, and the humans can stay alive and they can stay away from these monsters if they get to an elevated height. In this film, it's over, I believe, 8,000 feet. And so now humanity is living at the top of these mountains, and these monsters, while they are deadly and while they will chase them down underneath that elevated height, if you stay above that, they won't even attempt to go after you. There's no real explanation for the elevation or how the humans figured out that if they go above 8,000 feet, they'll stay alive. You just sort of get dropped into this film as the viewer 3 years into the earth being this way. So whatever has happened over 3 years to make the humans realize that this is what they need to do, that's when you get dropped in. And that'll lead us to our story, which stars Anthony Mackie and Marina Baccarin as a couple of the survivors of the human race living in one of these camps at the top of the mountains. And pretty much people are staying alive up there. They're all pretty much happy with living up there because you've got deer, you've got animal. For whatever reason, these monsters that are taking out the human race don't affect the animals at all. And so they still have a food supply coming up to the top of this mountain. And again, the humans are pretty content. But as fate would have it, Anthony Mackie's son in this film has a medical condition and needs certain medical supplies. And so Anthony Mackie and Marina Baccarin start going down the mountain to look for these medical supplies. But Marina Baccarin's character is not just looking for those medical supplies, she's looking for a way to actually stop these monsters. And that is the best setup that I can give you for this film. If that sounds like an interesting concept for a film, you should check this movie out. It is playing in theaters now. I went and saw this movie. I don't recommend you go to a theater for it, but we'll get to more of that in a minute. Let's get into my positives and some of my negatives. The first and really only positive that I have for this film is Anthony Mackie. I thought that he is in a completely different movie than everybody else in this film. I thought he brings it to the stage. He's got a great presence in this movie. They do some voiceovers with him. I think he's got a great voiceover voice. For whatever it's worth, I think Anthony Mackie does a great job in this movie. If you're a huge Anthony Mackie fan, I think watching this film just for him would be worth it. But that said, that's where my positives end. Let's get into my negatives. My first negative for this movie is, while I just praised Anthony Mackie's character, I think he's got a little bit of depth. I think he's got a little bit of story. You can kind of get behind his character in this movie. No other character development happens. I feel like part of the reason that is because you're dropped into a situation 3 years later. And so since you're just dropped into this world and it's go time and they're already going to start this mission to go down the mountain, you don't really get to live with these characters enough. And the movie does try and pause and let other characters that are with Anthony Mackie's crew give their backstories, but at that point you're just not invested. You don't have enough in you. So if these monsters come and they start taking people away, whatever they're doing with them, you don't really feel invested with that character. You're just kind of like, oh, all right, I want to see some monster carnage at this point. And I get it. We go to these movies for several different reasons, and one of them is to see monster carnage. But I guess the point I'm making here is there's no real character development past Anthony Mackie's character. You just have these unknown monsters coming after these people, and you're supposed to feel bad for these people, but you don't know them at all. And while we're on the subject of no development, let's talk about the no monster development, because my next negative is that this is an unknown monster, which isn't uncommon for films in this genre. You have these unknown monsters that take over the earth. There's no real explanation for them. There's no real explanation for the reason they can't go above 8,000 feet. In fact, I feel like when this movie was written, they were like, all right, we need a hook. We need something like A Quiet Place. We need something like Bird Box. What are we going to do? Let's do Night and Day. And they're like, we just did that with Arcadia. And they're like, let's just go up high. And there's no real reason for that. In fact, they allude to something towards the end of this film that I won't spoil right now. When they allude to that, you're like, well, then it makes absolutely no sense why these things can't go to a certain height. So there's no real monster development either. And then when you look at the design of these monsters, they're just sort of a copy paste of other films that have already done this and already done this better. They are big, they have armor on them, you can't shoot them, bullets will just bounce off, bombs just knock them down for a few minutes. There seems to be no real way to destroy these things. And when you look at these things, you're kind of like intrigued at the beginning. You're kind of like, okay, what's the design going to be? And you're like, it's kind of a mixture of a lot of things. I see tentacles at one point, and that kind of reminds me of War of the Worlds. I see these big armored roach-looking monsters, and that kind of reminds me of A Quiet Place. And I'm like, well, there's a little bit of everything in here. And so you end up having this copy-paste looking monster, and it just didn't do it for me. And because of the lack of character development for the humans and the lack of creativity for the monsters, I feel like this movie is just thrown at you. It feels rushed and boring at the same time. You have this, we got this serious problem with the human race scenario thrown in your face, and it's go, 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 and you feel kind of rushed. You want to live with that opening a little bit, but they don't give you any time to live with that opening. And you're like, all right, well, then I'll depend on the human character development for this movie. And it's really not there. It's kind of boring. So rushed and boring at the same time, it's not a good mixture. And that'll lead me to my next negative, is that because of all of that stuff, this feels like it should have been a straight to Netflix movie, a straight to streaming movie. It feels like it's got the budget for a straight to streaming movie. There's nothing about this movie that feels cinematic. There's several times in this film where you're like, oh, that's definitely a green screen that they're running away from right now. There's nothing in this film that feels like it was shot on location. There's nothing in this film that feels like you're claustrophobic. Like, they spend a good chunk of this movie going through a mine, and at no point as the viewer did I feel like, oh, that's a claustrophobic situation, I don't like that. And there should have been something there, but there really wasn't. None of this movie feels cinematic. And that'll lead me over to my last negative for this movie, but I will warn you here that it is a bit of a spoiler. So if you want to go into Elevation with absolutely no knowledge at all, then maybe back out of this review, hit that like button on your way out. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, but we're going to talk spoilers now, so here we go. So the spoiler of this film is that at one point they do find a way to destroy these things, and it's coating a singular bullet in some sort of blue substance, putting that in your gun, shooting the monster with one bullet. The bullet penetrates their armor, penetrates their skin, and then they just blow up and evaporate simultaneously. And it is one of the biggest letdowns in, how are they going to defeat these things? Because at least in the movie A Quiet Place, when they did finally figure out, hey, these monsters have an issue with hearing. So when they crank up the volume on something, they freak out, their armor moves, and you see Emily Blunt put that shotgun underneath their face and just blow one of their heads off. It's a great moment in the movie, and when you get to see it going forward, it's a lot of fun. But in this film, you have none of that. You just have the monsters taken by surprise that somebody's actually able to shoot at them. And when the bullet penetrates them, you don't even see blood. You just see this weird, evaporation moment. And it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I had no fun with the end of this movie, where I should have had the most fun. Listen, you want to give me a rushed movie, you want to be boring throughout, okay, at least give me a third act. You have a moment at the end where you have the human race now loading up with these bullets and going down below, and all right, let's watch this happen. But unfortunately, they don't let you see it happen. They just give you an aerial view of the area as Anthony Mackie's doing a voiceover, and you see these big explosion evaporations happening beneath them. And you're like, you couldn't even give me a close-up shot of that. You're not even gonna give me that. That's the end of my spoiler. I just wanted to throw that in there. It really irritated me in the theater, and I was like, how do I work this into my review? Overall, it seems needless to say, but I absolutely would not recommend this film to anyone. I don't recommend it in theaters. I don't recommend it on streaming. If you do feel like you need to watch this one, definitely wait for this on streaming, because at least you can pause it and walk away for a few minutes and wonder how a movie like this got made. But those are just my opinions, because that's my review for Elevation. Guys, if you had a chance to check out this movie yet, if you have, let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Maybe you disagree with me and you really liked it. Maybe you just love these type of movies, and so this is right up your alley. Let me know in the comment section. I'd love to know. With that said, if you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Alright guys, we got to the end of my Elevation movie review, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I am in this hotel room, very self-conscious about people on the other sides of these walls, and it's very echoey in here, so you gotta record when you have the time, and this is where I'm at, and this is when I record. With that said, if you like this video and you want to check out other content on my channel, well, I've got all of my horror movie reviews right there, and I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.